today's drawing lesson, and I want to do I want to see if I can address a couple of things that were happening in the cylinders and cubes. Okay, so when you're looking at a cylinder, here are the rules that you want to follow. Okay, so there's a minor axis, and it lines up, right? And it splits side A from side B exactly down the middle, and this is side A and this is side B. Okay, the bottom that you see here, that is a little bit more open than that. And what that depends on is it depends on where your eye level is. Okay, so as I'm moving towards eye level, this ellipse on the top, like look at this, becomes like a glass sitting like, right, the ellipse on the top becomes more and more, it gets a smaller minor axis. Okay, and by smaller, it's this distance across the minor axis gets smaller and smaller. And as I move further down the cylinder, the minor axis grows. Okay, that's something we just start to know. That's something we know. So here's the minor axis, and it's growing as we're moving downwards. Okay, all right, so that's kind of cool. One of the kind of key mistakes that I see people making is this. They sort of, instead of rounding it, and I know it's tricky. It's like tricky to get this feeling, which is partially why we warm up with it, okay? And it's perfectly fine to have your lines be nice and sketchy on it. What you want to avoid is you want to avoid lines that are like this. You don't want that kind of like hairy line. You rather have a very light line that kind of goes in place, and you can sort of sit in place and repeat the action. Okay, so then the cube, here's the cube. And I try as hard as I can to get it correct. And then I go back and I put it through its three tests. Okay, so the first one is usually the party hat. And the party hat is right here. And it's when it just goes too high. And so I need to move that downward and that downward. And I've really helped that a lot. The next one is sliding verticals, okay? And so I want to look from the center, and I want to check the right edge and make sure that it's parallel, and I want to check the left edge and make sure that it's parallel. These don't have to be vertical, but they do all have to be parallel. And the last one is I want to see if any of the legs, especially these outer legs, if either of those outer legs are overly long. And it feels to me like this one, it just feels too long to me. And so that helps. And now this cube has something lurking. There's a mistake lurking, and I'm gonna guess it's right here. Let's see, if I drop that just a little bit, it's starting to feel better. Okay, so these take a little bit of practice, but they're really worth the practice. So moving on, another one of the geometric solids is a circle. And when you put a line through the circle, that line starts to determine the axis, okay? And we use that as a minor axis for an ellipse that passes through, okay? So that gives us our y dimension, and now I'm going to put an x dimension in, like that. Okay, here's an x dimension, And I want to put a Z dimension in here. Okay, and so we start to end up with a fairly convincing cylindrical or spherical form, and we can move it around. I'm going to change the size of the ellipse on the inside. Look, I just really messed that ellipse up. So here, it has to be symmetrical around that. Okay. And now I'm going to put the Y in, and the Y goes the major axis. And then I can put a Z in, and the Z cuts back in space. And you start having some real dimension there. If you do two Z's, I'll put a Z there, and if I erase the top, you can start to see, for instance, the top of a lemon. You could be drawing like a wedge of an orange or a lemon or something like that. So that's the way. I'll try and see if I can get a better one. Circles are really hard to draw well. And I'm going to do a different axis for the minor axis this time. There we go. Top edge pretty bad. Bottom edge okay. Okay, X, Y, and Z axis. And we can start to see, and you know, if you want to, you can put more cross contours on this. They would line up on the circle. And I haven't talked to you guys about exactly what a cross contour line is, but I want to use this as an opportunity to bring it up. So this outline right there, see I'm darkening on the outline, that's a contour line, okay? And then this is a cross contour line. It comes up and across the contour. Look, we can turn this little package, we can turn this little cube into a present. Okay, and we did that by adding cross contour lines, and cross contour lines convince us of the volume of an object. And so one of the ways that I love to see people doing cross contour lines is when they S around like a cylinder. It kind of starts to give us a barber pole like effect. You can see the cylinder like that. That's one kind of cross contour line that you can do on the cylinder. When we do cross contour lines on a sphere, one thing to notice is they grow closer as they get towards the poles. So the middle of them, you have this space in the middle where they widen out, and then they'll turn, but always closer around, closer as they move towards the poles. Okay, so we talked a little bit in the warm-up about how to draw a cone, but the easiest way to draw a cone is if you find the minor axis and the major axis, and from the minor axis you come upwards and connecting 1, 2, and then it really helps to do an ellipse here that follows that earlier cross contour, that follows that earlier minor axis is what I meant to say. And that becomes a very convincing 3D cone. That's how we can just like really draw a beautiful 3D cone. Another one that, let's see, I'm going to clear this guy out real quick. Okay. Another one that we want to do, so we've got the cone, we've got the sphere, we've got the cylinder, we've got the cube, pyramid. the way that you find the center of a rectangular or square shape is you put an X through it. So there's the X, that gives us the center, and then from the center point we send a line upwards and connect corners. And that gives us a pyramid. And you can do cross contours. Here's a different kind of cross contour. But they really convince us of the volume, and later on they become very important construction tools. Okay? So there's the pyramid. So we've got the cone, the pyramid, the cube, the cylinder. The last one I think is a lot of fun, and the last one is this. It's a banner. It's like a ribbon, and the way that you get it is it has a shape like that. You take a shape like that, and then you make a parallel. You duplicate it in parallel, right? And now if I go like this and like this and like this and like that, and that gives me a ribbon. Okay, so let's do it again. I'll do it here. So you just you shape a curve however you want to, and then you draw it over again a little lower. Okay, and that's a classic ribbon. And so here's like a classic use of the ribbon. You take this and duplicate what you just did. And you can have like a heart inside of there. And erase out the things that would become invisible. Okay. So that's the last of the geometric solids. Those are the main geometric solids. And I'd like for your practice, so for today's homework, what I'd like to ask you to do is I'd like to ask you to practice the cone, and you'll notice that you can get the cone wrong if you don't base it on the minor axis. Like if I do an ellipse and then I just think that I could go like that, see how the cone is skewed? I mean, it can be interesting to skew a cone, but to really get it right, you start out with an ellipse, you add the minor axis, and you connect the edges. And then from the minor axis, you can add cross contour lines. Okay. So there's the cone. Quick review of the pyramid. What we want is we want a square. Again, you find the center of the square by drawing an X through it. And then from there, you can project from the center here, and we'll connect corners. 1, 2, 3. And that's fun. You can do it in any direction. And I'm going to quickly do this. Okay, so that gives us our XYZ. And then the last thing for today is a ribbon. And it's tempting to not go far enough out with it. Okay, so those are our shapes for today. All right.